I do not want to. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the budget committee meeting. We are at Pinole Valley High School, room D as in David 208. We are going to start introductions with the people who are in the room. And that will be our roll call and just your name, who you're representing. And then we will go to the people on Zoom. So we will start with
President Gonzalez-Hoy.
Hi, everyone. President of the board. Sorry, I got totally thrown off. I have.
So-
It's not ready.
Okay.
So this time, everybody introduce yourself.
Okay.
And then we'll introduce on
Thank
the.
you.
Okay, so go ahead,
I'm Dr. Harris. I'm the superintendent of West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Okay,
Good evening. My name is Kim Moses. I'm the interim associate superintendent over business services.
okay,
Mary Kitchen, coordinator in business services. Veronica Vega, senior admin assistant for Kim Moses.
Dr. Camille Johnson, interim associate superintendent, human resources.
Good evening, Denise Steen, representing WCCAA.
Good evening, Sonia Neely Johnson, interim associate superintendent, educational services / CAO. Good evening, Kimberly Chamberlain, representing IFPTE Local 21 SSA chapter.
and then Mr. Mitchell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Mark Mitchell. I'm the executive director, United Teachers of Richmond.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Shanae Bond, Teamster Union Representative for the classified staff.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Now I'm doing it correctly. Demetria Gonzalez-Hoy, president of the board.
Thank you. I am Jamila Smith Folds, clerk of the board. Anyone else on Zoom, if you would like to unmute and introduce yourself, this is the time to do so.
Everyone, Guthrie Flashman, interim SELPA director for West Contra Costa.
Louis Freeze, Associate Superintendent for Facilities and Operations.
Good afternoon, Tracy Logan, Chief Technology Officer.
Hi, Sanji Bell, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Hello, Michael Booker, and I'm the safety consultant for the school district.
Good afternoon, I'm Dr. Allison Huey, Director of College and Career.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're gonna go to public comment. Is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. And then now we are going to go to agenda item number 2 and 3, purpose and outcomes of the committee, vision and updates. We're turning this over to CBO Moses. CBO Moses, please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening. Having a little bit of a technical issue, not quite sure why PVHS is not accepting my Wi-Fi. So I'm gonna ask Dr. Hurst if you're able to, if you'd like me to pull up the.
Yeah. And then I can look.
Awesome. Okay, so I will move over here. Veronica, yours is now not working. Seems to be my login.
And CBO Moses, before you start, anyone online, if you cannot hear us or you need something, please raise your hand or text someone in the room. All right. Okay, we're ready. Whenever you are.
Are you looking for your budget?
Yeah, so, okay, can we stop share while we pull it up really quickly? Okay, and while you pull that up for me, I think I just want to start by saying tonight we're going to review just the purposes and the outcomes that we aspire for the committee. I want to thank Board Trustee Jamila Smith Folds and President Gonzalez-Hoy for providing this opportunity for us to examine. Are we okay over there, Veronica? So that we can examine our fiscal outlook and begin to dig deep into how we'll identify how to support the solvency plan. So without further ado, it looks like we're ready. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you. All right, I'd like to thank Dr. Hurst for making the accommodations for me, and I apologize for the technical issues. Sanji has a hand raised. Sanji? No? Okay. Thank you.
I was just trying to let you know that I was here, so sorry.
Oh, no worries. Okay, thank you. All right, so this evening, we prepared a presentation to share with you agenda items 2 and 3, where we're going to talk about an overview of the committee and the purpose of it, and then I'll move on to visions and goals for fiscal solvency plan. So again, I'm Kim Moses, the interim assistant superintendent of business services, and very proud to serve in that role. So we'll get started. I just want to recap the work of this committee, chaired by Trustee Smith Folds. It is the budget subcommittee, formerly called the contract subcommittee. Contracts, we began a review of contracts in spring of 2023 in order to address and inform the required fiscal solvency plan. And in the spring, the committee had a goal of identifying non-essential contracts that we could possibly consider for potential budget reductions that are required by the County Office of Education and our fiscal solvency plan. So in the spring, they began to review the contracts from 22-23 with their departmental managers. And tonight we're going to continue that work by looking at our initial contracts for 23-24 to continue that work and inform the process. So why do we need a budget subcommittee? I want to back up to school year 2019-20, where our district began the implementation of the solvency plan. At that time, we were tasked with identifying $24 million in budget reductions in order to address issues within our operating budget and structural deficits within that general fund. In February 22, $8 million in budget reductions were identified and approved by our board in order to implement a plan for reductions. At that time, it was expected that there would be 16 million in further reductions in the following school year 2021. However, shortly after that, the COVID pandemic struck, and that shifted our district priorities. And it also provided temporary state and federal monetary resources to address the pandemic and address and mitigate the effects of that pandemic. So we continue to have an issue with our structural deficit within our operating budget. We received $139 million in COVID-19 resources in order to address and mitigate the pandemic. That money was allocated for spending beginning in March of 2020 and lasting through September of 2024. Those resources are now expiring after this school year and will not be renewed. These one-time resources allowed us to operate without budgetary reductions in the last few years, but there is no room to move the general fund education expenses into our general fund due to the structural deficit. And so budget reductions must be made. So our desired outcome for this committee, tonight we're starting with contracts, but we haven't expressed task from the County Office of Education that requires that we identify reductions to address our structural deficit. On September 23rd, 2023, in a letter directed to our superintendent and our board, our County Office of Education asked that, or informed us that despite the submission of a 2023-24 adopted budget that included a fiscal solvency plan to address the necessary reductions needed, the county superintendent requires the submission of a detailed written report with an itemized list of budget reductions by December 15th, 2023. To be acted upon at the January 24th, 2024 board meeting. This direction from the county requires that we gather input and we provide recommendations to our board, and this is the start of that process. Because we must now identify those reductions to address that structural deficit in our unrestricted operating budget. So I'd like to go over a few slides that will update the group and the community on our fiscal solvency plans. This initial slide shows our unrestricted operating budget with identified fiscal cuts. When our budget was approved in June, it included an expectation that we reduce expenditures. This slide represents what that will look like once those cuts are identified or reductions are identified. So if we take a look at this multi-year projection, it shows our budget for 23-24 that was already adopted. And then it plans for our out years of 24-25 and 25-26. These projections were prepared using our best practices in accounting principles and requirements of the county and the State Board of Education. So if you take a look at just our operating budget for this current year, the adopted budget, it shows that we have total revenue, and I'll use my cursor to take us through it. Total revenue coming in our unrestricted general fund of $357.3 million. This is based upon our projected ADA of 24,832 students. That's the number of students based upon the average daily attendance in our enrollment. We anticipate with our adopted budget that our expenditures from the general fund will total $271.4 million, which leaves us with an excess budget of $85.8 million. However, we are also required to support other programs. And in this case, we see here that there's a required $85.8 million, not required, expected $85.8 million in expenditures that will need to contribute to two funds. One is our special education department and the other is our restricted required maintenance. Those two funds are expected to need $85.8 million in support. That leaves our change in fund balance to a very minimal amount. However, we are not starting with empty budget. Our beginning balance is $25 million. And based upon the change in fund balance, we would end this year with $25 million in our ending balance. However, I want to point to the gray bars that we are required to withhold 3% of our operating budget for reserves. That required reserve is $15.6 million. And that is an amount that we must withhold and continue to hold in our fund balance in order to meet our obligations and expectations of the state. So with that 15 million and also assigning a buffer for potential declining enrollment, our ending fund balance is expected to be 25 million. And we are also expected to be able to retain our reserves. So the reserves are Fund 17, and it shows here that for each of our multi-year projected budgets, we would be able to retain a reserve. And also, if the cuts are made, we'll be able to ensure that we can meet our obligation of 3% and still have a healthy ending fund balance with that in mind. In order to have this budget come to fruition, we must identify the cuts as expected in the solvency plan. However, on the next slide, I'm going to show you the reality if we do not make the recommended reductions. So this slide shows our unrestricted operating budget without fiscal reductions. It is the exact same worksheet with some differences. The difference being that although this initial adopted budget is the same, in year 2 and in year 3, our structural deficits have a tremendous impact on our budgets. So this blue line here is actually transfers in from our Fund 17, our savings account. So we'll see that in year 1, we end with a healthy balance in Fund 17 and also with our required reserves. In year 2, we would need to take 15 million out of that fund in order to meet our obligations of contributions and be able to have a fund balance in compliance with the 3% reserve. You will notice that in year 2, our ending fund balance is just a small amount over our required 3% reserve. When we move over to years 25 and 26, we see a structural deficit down here of negative 13 million. Even though we would contribute an additional 20 million exhausting our Fund 17. So we have no more reserves. We've assigned the reserves to address our structural deficit, but we aren't able to meet our obligation if this scenario, these projections with no reductions are a reality. We would actually only have 2 million in our fund balance after we won't be able to meet the 15.7 million required reserves. This is what the county is certainly concerned about. So it's this slide without any reductions that clearly shows the structural deficit as projected with this adopted budget. In June, we approved a fiscal solvency plan. Our board approved a fiscal solvency plan, and the fiscal solvency plan called for 0 cuts during the school year, but called for cuts to happen in the next school year and the following year, 25-26. It is anticipated that what we'll need is about a $15 million reduction in FTE and approximately a $4.6 million reduction in non-salary expenses. With the savings from step and column, if we do elect to reduce those salaries, we would have a total reduction of negative 17.3 million. It has been anticipated that in the following year, we would also need to make additional cuts in order to achieve the goals of the fiscal solvency plan. So over the course of the 2 years, the cut total will be just shy of $25 million. This graph shows the impact of our operating expenses with no reductions on the right and with reductions on the left. Here, I'm showing that if we implement the plan as laid out, what we would have is a 5.9% reduction in salaries and a 1.5% reduction in non-salary expenses. So what are our next steps? We need to solicit input and suggestions from our labor partners, our staff, our community, our board, our cabinet, so that we can begin to identify those potential reductions that need to be included in the December 15th list that the county has requested. Through gathering that input, we submit that input for consideration with our school board, and depending upon their action, would notify the county of our plan moving forward. What is the role of business services? Currently, business services is operating with our approved budget with a reduction target based upon what was prepared in June. We are in the process of completing our first interim budget to confirm these projections. We're looking at our expenses in Q1, and we're looking at other factors to determine if there might be adjustments to this approved budget plan. The reduction plan could go up or down depending upon what we find out within our first interim budget report. So that is the conclusion of the slides, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, CBO Moses. Are there any questions and clarifying questions in the room?
I have a few questions.
Okay. Before you start, President Gonzalez-Hoy, let me see if there's any clarifying questions on Zoom. It looks like we have one from we have Mr. Mitchell. Would you like to go first?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Moses, is the 85 million that you're contemplating transferring to special ed and other restricted sources, is that affected at all by the fact that you have $97 million in surplus currently that was left unspent from last year? And how will those funds be taken into account for transferring an additional 85 million or something less, hopefully?
Well, Mr. Mitchell, thank you for your question. We actually are not sure until we finish our first interim budgeting, what is left in our unrestricted fund. The number that you share sounds like it's a combination of restricted and unrestricted funds, but until we actually comb through first interim, we can't identify that number.
Thank you so much. President Gonzalez-Hoy, question?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Thank you, Ms. Moses, for the presentation. Could you pull up slide 9 for me?
Absolutely. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. In total program contribution, I'm talking about SPED and
Routine restricted
thank you.
maintenance.
I see that it's projecting an increase over time. Could you talk about why we're seeing increase over time?
Absolutely. So over the past 3 years, our contributions to our specialized services has increased quite significantly. I believe that this past year, our contribution to special ed was 79 million. Forgive me, that is a number that comes to mind. If it's not accurate, I can walk that back, but 72 and 79 stick out for me. And the routine maintenance is something that is created by our maintenance and operations department. So given that each year over the last 3 years, the contributions to SPED have increased dramatically, the best practices for accounting are that we expect that unless there are significant changes in our special education program, that those costs will continue to rise. That's my best guess at this moment because these projections were prepared prior to my arrival. However, that is where I believe that number is estimated from, what's been spent and a percentage of increase that we've had over the last 3 years.
Thank you. My next question is about, actually, Mr. Mitchell talked about the 97 million that you referenced. I think he was talking about mostly the balance for the restricted side,
Okay.
which is not shown here because obviously it's not part of our work in the committee, but how does that play out on our deficit? Because obviously we're not just gonna leave $97 million sitting in an account, right? So how will that play into our overall plan?
So the overages in our categorical funds is what I believe Mr. Mitchell is referring to. Those monies are earmarked for special programs, special services, and specific programs within the district. By definition, restricted funds can only be used on supplemental activities that enhance our base program. All of the expenses related to our day-to-day operations and the expectations of how we provide service to students according to our staffing matrix, according to our labor contracts, and according to our responsibilities to our schools and students have to fall in this fund. So the additional monies are going to be spent. I have strict orders from Dr. Hurst, and I'm working with Ms. Sonia Neely Johnson to ensure that there's a clear plan to spend down every penny before it expires. But we have a responsibility to ensure that those monies are planned and implemented according to the needs of our schools, our staff, and our community. So we'll actually need to, given that the plan was created prior to both Ms. Neely Johnson and myself being appointed, we actually need to comb through each of the plans for the restricted categorical budgets one by one to ensure that they're meeting the needs of our students and our schools and our staff. And we're in the process of doing that right now.
Is there a possibility that we could also find ways to put restricted funds into current unrestricted costs? Like, for example, here I understand it's obviously enhanced programs, but could, for example, let's say that we pay for, it's a bad example because I know it's not true, but let's say that we pay for an after-school program with general fund.
Okay.
Could we possibly use 90, out of the 97 million to pay for that and then release, let's say $100,000 from the general fund?
That's a good question. You're right, that is not a good example because. That's okay. Let me give you another one. Let's say our Title I funds, right? So for our Title I schools, currently written into our LCAP, we have some additional support positions, right? But written into our LCAP, the support positions are for all schools. If we were to shift that to a restricted source, two things would happen. One is we wouldn't be able to provide it district-wide because, for example, the resource I've used, Title I, can only be used for schools that are designated as Title I. So those positions, we could continue to have them, but they would have to be supplemental only to the schools that that fund serves. And many of almost all of our categorical resources are that way. They're cited for, or they're set aside for specific purposes or for specific populations. So the question is, could we do that? Yes, but we'd be limited and we'd be kicking the can down the road if we were trying to do that with base expenses that we should have in our operating budget, because that's how we create the structural deficit, by putting required salaries and services into a restricted bucket when it really should be unrestricted if it's expected to be ongoing and consistent across the district. So I'm going to sum this up by saying our restricted funds play a huge role. They allow us to provide additional programs, services, and opportunities for our students and staff, but each categorical fund has to be allocated for the purpose in which it was intended. So it's almost like putting a puzzle together. And while we're happy to do that to serve temporary needs, because our goal with those categorical supplemental funds is that we allocate them to students and programs so that our students are better off. And over time, we don't need those supplemental programs, right? That is why the money is not consistent. It is meant to be a temporary solution to help us problem solve to be better. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's kind of the difference between restricted and unrestricted. Sure, we could shift some things over there, but it cannot be things that we're required to have for all schools.
Yeah, it does answer my question.
Okay.
And I think that what you're making me,
No, keep moving.
what you're making me think about is specifically our SPED area.
Mhm.
We are funding, and I'm trying not to look at Ms. Neely Johnson, I don't want to mess up, but we are funding a lot of SPED issues that a lot of contracts that we're not able to fulfill ourselves because there's no staff, for example.
Yes.
So I wonder if we could potentially pay out of restricted funds for those resources until we're able to find them. Eventually, I know it is kicking them, the can down, but at the same time, we're just not ultimately finding the actual thing that we need. So I wonder if that's an area that we could look at to pay for through restricted funding. But
so I hear where you're going, because the amount of contribution to special ed is extremely large, right? However, our categorical monies will be better spent supporting general education students so that we decrease the number of students identified as special ed. Many of our students who are identified as special ed, I won't say many, I will say some, is a result of them needing a higher level of service that we can provide through supplemental categorical funds. But once they get an IEP, the services that are required through that IEP become our base program. So we can't shift those services to a categorical resource, which is why we must give the contribution to the special education program. However, we could do a deep dive into the expenditures for special education to find out if there are any contracts or any services that are in addition to the required special education services. If we find any of those contracts or services or positions, then we certainly can look to reduce those. But if it's written into an IEP as a service, or if it's written into, their learning plan and agreed to by the team, then we cannot move it to restricted because it's not restricted, it's required. So I know that's difficult, to process, but that's the law.
Thank you for that. Okay, my last question. I've been getting a lot of questions. This is the question I just got actually in a community forum.
Okay.
How could we be cutting staffing
Mm-hmm.
when we have hundreds of openings?
Mm-hmm. That's a
Right.
valid question.
And like, I think I was able to come up with a good answer,
Mm-hmm.
but I was wondering if you could answer that.
Absolutely.
And if you could also talk about, are we currently funding those positions even though no one's there?
Mhm.
Or are we funding it twice, like are we paying for stuff and projecting in our budget that same position? Because that obviously adds to the overall deficit,
Mhm.
even though that person doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if you could add that into your.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it does seem a little strange that we have to cut when we have so many vacancies. And some of those vacancies can certainly, be considered for reduction, but only the vacancies that aren't directly tied to a base service for students. So I want to first talk about what happens when we have a vacancy. If we have a vacancy for a classroom teacher, if we have a vacancy for a yard supervisor, if we have a vacancy for a paraprofessional, for a cafeteria worker, those are positions that we still have to staff because children have to eat, services have to be provided, supervision has to happen, substitutes must be provided for classrooms. So even though they're listed as a vacancy, we have to fill the need, and there's usually 9 times out of 10, a cost associated with that. So let's take a substitute teacher, for example. We have a teacher vacancy, we still have to staff the class. So the teacher, we have to pay either substitute rate, or we have to pay extra duty rates for teachers who take additional kids, or we have to pay a contractor. In the case of special ed, we sometimes bring in contractors. Somebody has to assume the responsibility for the instruction of those students, and they have to be paid. So yes, it's a vacancy, and there would be some unintended savings on the benefits side, but the salary side is almost always spent if it's a vacancy related to one of the positions that must be filled. Now, if you have a position, I'm going to use this example. This is an important position, but let's say you had a vacancy for a literacy coach, right? That is not a required position. It's a highly desired one, but that is a position that can be reduced. But I can tell you, because I've been looking at our budget, our approved budget, almost every coach of any kind is paid out of those restricted funds and not out of unrestricted funds. So I think I want to sum it up by saying positions that are not required or necessary for our day-to-day operations to educate our students are already shifted to the restricted side, usually because those are the positions we can pay for with restricted dollars.
Sorry, one clarification.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Ron, I'll be done.
It's okay.
So when we are actually budgeting for those vacant positions,
Mm-hmm.
we are not budgeting, let's say like that third grade position plus a sub. We're just practically budgeting the sub rate until we fill it with a teacher, or are we budgeting in our projection a teacher and a sub? Like the salary and benefits for the whole year for that teacher. You understand where
I do understand.
Okay.
So this is why first interim is so important, because during our first interim review, we're going to be able to see how much we're spending in substitute costs and how many of our vacancies, what the allocation is for that, right? So we'll be able to see exactly what our expenditures for September and October have been to fill those vacancies. In this moment, I can't tell you exactly what that amount is, but I can say that because we know we have a lot of vacancies, our substitute budget wasn't built to cover the vacancies. Our substitute budget was built to cover things like sick leave, bereavement, personal necessity, professional development. So in developing a budget for substitute costs, we aren't budgeting in the substitute line item for vacancies. So when we
So we're
pay
not double
substitute,
dipping.
no, when
Got
we pay substitutes, what happens is it's taking from the substitute line items that would normally go to teacher benefit leave, right? So what we have to do, because there will be some savings on the salary side and there will be some overages on the substitute side. What we have to do as a department is look at that and balance. And then there will be some unintended savings. We won't know, however, that amount is gonna differ each quarter. So we have to keep a closer eye this year on what that looks like. And it's really interesting. This year is going to be interesting because one of the things I didn't say in this presentation is that our last expiring COVID fund is the one that expires September 24th. Right now, it's holding approximately 14 million in teacher salaries. And these are salaries that are needed that have to be shifted to the general fund. And that, in essence, is where our structural deficit comes from. We've shifted those salaries over to categorical temporary funding sources, and now they need to go back to our general funding sources because they're classroom positions in most cases.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, anything to clarify, any questions to ask, Zoom and or in the room?
So when you're talking about a cost savings for perhaps the teachers, but an overage expenditure for substitutes, where does the cost for our contractors come in, and how is that going to affect? Because we're paying far more for contractors to fill substitute positions in particularly special education, and that's really going to have an impact on how much we're spending.
Yes. Yes, you are right. The contractors typically do have a larger hourly rate for their services. However, the way in which we justify the expenditures for our contractors are they do not get benefits. So their contracts are in many cases more than what we might pay an hourly employee, but our hourly employee get benefits. Our contractors do not. And the reason, 9 times out of 10, the reason why those rates are larger is because the agency itself takes a percentage off the top. So our contracts are written so that it shows the hourly rate, but baked into that hourly rate of what it costs for a contractor to cover, say, a paraprofessional position is also the agency upcharge. So it isn't that they're getting paid a lot more than our regular employees. They're getting paid, the agency's getting paid, and they're being compensated a little bit better because they don't get any benefits. And that's how that
off the
offsets.
budget discussion with that, wouldn't that be a really good trust building conversation to have with our Teamsters to make sure that they understand that, and that might ease some of their frustrations about, well, these people get paid so much more. So in thinking about moving forward with budget cuts, that might be something that we do for our staffs.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Any other questions, comments before we move on? I do have a comment.
Okay.
Well, kind of a comment question combined. So the numbers stick out to me, like 139 million we got in COVID. But what I'm hearing you say is before you, when 139 million came down, the powers that be took that, they robbed Peter to pay Paul. In a sense, because they took that money and used it on things that eat and breathe. And now that money that they use on things that eat and people that eat and breathe and have to be sustained is not sustainable because that money's running out. Is that kind of right, sort of right? Am I in the ballpark around what's happening with the 139 million that we had in COVID?
Yeah, so you are in the ballpark. The amount of funds that came in were used to mitigate the pandemic, but we also have to realize that prior to the pandemic, we needed to cut. Now, if we had went ahead and cut as we're trying to recover from the pandemic, the result of that could have been catastrophic for our district, right? We had all this money, we need to cut teachers. It would have been based upon accounting principles, that would have been the right thing to do.
Right.
However, based upon the human principle of what we needed to do in the time of recovering from a pandemic, I do believe that the CBOs before me thought about the overall needs of the district and how they allocated those funds.
So took that money and put it over where we had the structural deficit before of 14 billion or whatever it was.
Mhm,
And then took that COVID money and used it to fill that up.
mhm,
So then you didn't have to make any of the 14 million cuts that you needed.
mhm.
Now that that money's running out, so now another number comes in. Now it's 24 million,
Mhm,
right? So there's 24 million that now we have to create,
mhm,
24 millions of savings that we have to create.
mhm.
We can no longer look to COVID money to create that because that's gone.
Mhm,
So now we have to look at other places to create the used to be 14, now it's $24 million worth of cuts. And then the county says, I need a list by December the 15th, how you're gonna come up with $24 million that you're gonna save.
mhm,
And then I need you to then vote on that in January
Mhm.
24 that says you're gonna do it.
mhm. Yes.
Is that
and-
right? Okay.
Yes, and let me go back to this slide. Let me go back to this slide. So if you look at bullet point 2, in February 2020, under Dr. Tony Wold, we cut 8 million and we needed to cut 16 million more. So that's the 24 million.
Uh-huh.
Now, when the COVID money came in, it's my assumption, I can't absolutely verify this, but the 8 million that were cut, I believe eventually got back into our budget, and so we're back at 24.
24. Okay,
Yeah,
because the
that's-
COVID money came and it was like, yeah, let's go pull everything back in that we cut out because we have the money for it now.
Mhm.
Okay, but it wasn't permanent money because that money
No.
was going to go away.
No,
eventually.
but I do believe, because remember, we had a full year off of school,
Right,
right? So coming back to school in 2021 school year, anticipating the increased needs of our students, I think it was realized that we needed more staff, not less.
so take the money, put it towards more
Put it
staff.
towards
not
more
less.
staff. Where I believe we could have done a better job is by creating a plan that didn't put permanent positions in that money.
In that 139.
Yeah, there,
Because now we're looking at how do we create 24 of
Mhm.
permanency? Because we still need those people and we still need those services and we still need those programs
Mhm.
because we still need to create what they thought they needed to create then which were the programs to help the kids, which was, okay, so we still need that, but now we have to figure out how to find that or create that, or now we have to do the work that was back in 2020 and say, where are we going to
Yes.
reduce that? Okay,
And we have to do it with our staffing matrix in mind.
Okay.
We have a staffing matrix of how we staff our schools for student services. But it's a basic, bare bones, this is what we need. Now, in our general fund, we also have some positions that we pay for that are based upon program needs in addition to our base staffing needs. So I don't want to make it seem like we have too many staff at our schools.
Right.
That's not it. But there are some schools that have supplemental staff that are being paid in the general fund.
okay, so I have one more number. So the 97,
Mhm.
so you have this number of 97, but you have to look at that 97 and see which part of that 97 can actually be unrestricted,
Mhm.
usable or decreasable, whatever the name is. But in that 97, some of it, because you have to look through it,
Mhm.
we're not gonna be able to use anyway because it's already restricted, which means it has a purpose that it has to be used for by the law. This is part of your 90s. I gave you $7. to go to the mall, but you have to spend it on jeans.
Mhm,
You could not spend that $7 on anything else.
mhm.
But then I gave you $3 and I was like, I don't care. So that $3 can be like, okay, I'm not gonna use it at all, or I'm gonna spend it on something else. But in that, you have to look in that big bucket of 97 to see which one is, I told you to spend it on this, it's the only thing you can spend it on, and which is, okay, this can be spent on something else, or this can be saved, or this can be done with whatever, because it's unrestricted.
Yes,
Okay, but that hasn't happened yet because you have to come through it line by line or item by item. And you're not gonna be able to get to that until first interim?
so we're getting to it. The issue is there has to be a coherent, aligned plan
Okay,
in order for the services and the plan for the categorical money
okay,
to be maximized for our students.
okay,
So I want to say that one of the ways in which we've spent categorical money previously is based upon individual need.
okay.
But because we're given that money to make systemic changes, to make our schools better off.
Our bucket of
our
97.
district. Yes.
Okay.
So what we have to do, because the money is sitting in different places,
Okay,
but what we need is a coherent plan so that we're not just spending haphazardly on small issues, that we're systemically using that money to build a stronger program for all students in our district.
so then you won't have to use because you're putting it in this other. So
Mhm.
last point,
Okay.
what you were telling us about, if we look at our general education needs
Mhm.
and we strengthen our general education needs,
Mhm.
then the need for our special ed would assumably go down
Mhm.
because you're increasing the general ed population of a reading specialist
Mhm.
or a resource room or so the kids that are at that tier one, everybody at that tier
Same.
one starts to get those needs necessary that they don't fall 3 grade levels behind,
Mhm.
or they don't have to have an IEP or a 504 because you're doing those services at a tier one level. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
A clarifying question,
Yes.
please. I think I just lost my train of thought. So, yeah, no, where is the current plan?
Mhm.
And who is designated to be on the next cycle of planning?
Well, we have a lot of resources and it depends. So currently we have plans in place that are very general. And they need to be narrowed down so that there's a clear goal and expectation for the expenditure. And so Sonia and I are looking at the largest pots, the largest categorical resources, and having discussions so that we can take that to Dr. Hurst and say, you know, we have this is the current plan for educator effectiveness. And this is how we think the plan works for our staff and our students, to come up with a plan in which we can ensure that what was written previously and what our needs are now actually align with how we're gonna have the best impact in our academic achievement with the funds that we have. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So some of the plans are created centrally. One of the things that Dr. Hurst and the board were very clear about is they want collaborative conversations about how to spend the categorical funds. Previously, it's been data-driven, but we need to be data-driven and gather the input of the boots on the ground, so to speak. Okay.
Can you give me a very simplistic definition of categorical funds? Because it has the word category in it, so I'm assuming it's funds that are based on a category to be spent in. That's a categorical fund?
Yeah, we use the term categorical to describe state and federal funds
Okay,
that are given to us within specific categories for a specific reason.
okay,
And categorical funds span across all of our programs, not just educational services.
okay,
There's categorical funds for nutrition. There's
okay,
categorical funds for adult ed.
okay,
There's categorical funds for special ed.
okay.
Across every department, there generally is some kind of money, if it's a department that's tied to student achievement, where the state is trying to support districts to meet the need in specific categories.
but you have to use it a specific way,
Exactly.
because that makes it then restricted,
Yes,
restricted categorical funds.
yes. For example, one of our, I won't say most restricted. Title I is restricted in that it can only be
Be used
used.
for Title I students
Mhm.
and at Title I sites, and
Mhm.
things that go directly to the Title I student community, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay,
So, and all of the funds have some kind of target population. And, yeah, so the amount of categorical funds we have requires that Sonia and I really look at the previous plan, any adjustments we need to the plan, and how we're gonna make it work and follow the rules.
okay, because that's the important part, because if not, that's where you get dinged.
Yes.
Because you're using other people's money, the
Mhm.
state and federal money, and not in the way that they said it, so that's when you get the FPM finding.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a better understanding now than they did before. Fantastic.
Okay.
Totally can tell that you were a teacher, principal, parent, like all of that. So the next thing is we're gonna hear from the board president, and then we're gonna dive into the work. If you're in the room and you need to go to the restroom, it's out there. If need to take a break on Zoom, please do so. Again, we're gonna be watching for hands, and we'll have spots for clarification along the way. Our goal tonight is to get out of here by 6 o'clock, which is an hour earlier, trying to give everybody back their time. So we're gonna work, with diligence, but this is the first meeting, not the last. So the biggest thing we need to do is get ready to set the calendar of the meetings that we need to do, because again, our deadline is December the 15th. We have to have this done by December the 15th. And President Gonzalez Hoy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Clerk Smith-Bowles. So, I wanted to just start a little bit by grounding us, like, CBO did, just around the scope of our work. We are going to provide space for our labor partners to meet with CBO Moses and her staff and Dr. Hurst and dig deeper into the funding, into the budget, challenge it, ask questions, help us collaboratively find maybe different ways of maybe using our funds, right? So the purpose of this committee is not really to challenge the numbers. We're moving forward with the assumption that what we heard today is all true, it's all real, right? But I say that caveat because there will be space for all of our partners who are on the ground, from our 5 labor unions to have those deeper conversations with Ms. Moses. So if we look at what was presented today and we look at our fiscal solvency plan, like Clerk Smith-Bowles mentioned, we have $24 million that we have to cut in 2 years. The goal for this committee is to find 4.6 million in savings minimum in contracts and services. Now, with a $500 and something million budget, we all think like, oh, that's gonna be easy. But if you all remember last year, we found less than $1 million when we went through this activity. So I say this because we have a huge challenge in front of us. I encourage all of us to have a more critical view of every dollar spent outside of research straight to our staff through this work. Every contract is important. It's there for a reason, right? We buy that service for a reason. But I want us all to push each other, that we have to have at least 4.6 million in savings by December, really by the end of November, by the end of our time together. If we don't, that's only gonna increase our cuts on FTEs that we have to make in the spring. If everything that we've heard about today stays the same, right? And I'm just gonna share that I felt really frustrated in the spring when we went through this, because there were many times that we had discussions about, oh, is this important, is this not? And we would fall into the space of the emotional side of looking at things, which I fall into all the time, which is, oh, but this is something really great, right? But because of that, we only found $800 and something thousand in savings, right? Which is nothing compared to the 5 million that we have to find now. So I would say it's not just to bring us down, but really to be realistic, that we do have big work in front of us. And really, we and the board rely on all of you as the experts to really tell us, like, we can live without this. Really, that's really the question in front of us, like, not like, I really like this, it's we can live without this, right? And Dr. Harris already had the conversation with cabinet that unfortunately, like, every department is gonna be hit, right? No single department is going to end up looking the same. And that's just the reality. And at one point, we laughed because I remember a couple of departments, right, we came last time, we're asking for more money. And obviously that's not happening this time around, right? Because if we don't do this work and we don't push forward with a fiscal solvency plan, and the board does not vote forward with the cuts in the spring, what's the negative side is that we get taken over by the county. It's no longer the state, right? Because the rules have changed. So it's really the county that comes in and really moves forward with their own decision and power to ignore us, ignore all of you, which we want to avoid. Because they've already shared that their priority is going to be right away, not just to cut the staffing, but also to potentially close schools and cut services that we might actually find as a priority. So I'll get off my high horse for a second, but I did want to just push us to look at every single contract a little bit different this time around. And like I mentioned, everything's important, but what is the most important things?
You know what I learned? I learned that if the county comes, or if we go into receivership, that they will not require just 3% in that little bucket that you have to have. They will require 6%. And it's a requirement. They will make you put 6% in that little bucket and reserve. So to President Gonzalez Hoy's point, we need to do it to us before it's done to us. And as plain as simple as we can get, I'd rather we do it to ourselves than somebody come in and do it to us, because they don't have the tenderness that we did see in the spring. Because we were all bleeding hearts, you know what I mean? Because it was hard, but hard doesn't mean impossible, it just means hard. So we are getting ready to have hard conversations a soft way. And we are getting ready to do our absolute best to look for minimum 5 million. My mom always says, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll get that 20 million. So we're gonna try our best. Principal Steen and CBO Moses, tell us what we're starting with. And so everybody can, Dr. Hurst, we can pull it up on the screen, the big screen. And then we can start, we have, 45 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
I have a number of questions.
Okay.
But I think maybe you should tell us what we're starting with, because you might answer my questions about.
What is it?
Well, I know what it is because I was on it a few years ago when we did this, so, but you go and then I'll go.
Okay,
Please.
so what we've prepared for the committee is a series of spreadsheets. We've separated the expenses by restricted and unrestricted. And because the structural deficit is on the restricted side of the house, I'm recommending that we start with that. So what we have are the sheets by department, and the sheets show the contracts that have been processed and enacted to date. There are still contracts that are being processed. I believe that our contracts budget in our unrestricted budget is about 37 million for this year. And what you're looking at tonight in these departmental sheets is about 26 million. So I'd start with that to say that most of our essential services are already here. So there are other contracts that will come up for consideration that you might choose not to grant. So I just wanted to start with that to say much of what you're looking at by department tonight it includes what we need to operate our district, and we'll talk through them one by one. But the first set of sheets you'll see is technology department.
Okay, so, CBO Moses, hold on 1 second. I did skip structure and process of the committee.
Okay.
So, President Gonzalez Toy or Superintendent Hurst, do you guys one of you want to take that?
So I know that the structure last time, I was talking to CBO Moses, I think it's gonna be a little bit different. Because last time we were talking about buckets.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if we're thinking about the same buckets, CBO Moses.
Well, because we took out the restricted contracts,
Right.
we have a lot less to review.
Mhm.
So by reviewing, department by department, there are less to review, and you can have the cabinet member to speak to what that money or that service is allocated for. So the buckets are much smaller, but they're still separated by department. And because these are our most essential contracts, having come before you early, we just suggest that we start here. Does that answer your question, Dr. Hurst?
Yeah, so last time the buckets were, we were not gonna make a decision, we're gonna actually make a decision to keep the contract, so that was one bucket. The second, yes, and then the next bucket was, we were gonna make a decision tonight to cut the contract.
Okay,
And then the third bucket was, we're gonna make a decision to cut the contract in the future year, like it couldn't be cut this year, but it was gonna be cut in the future year. And then the last bucket was really those contracts where we could not reach a decision, but it was gonna go back to the board for deliberation, and the board was gonna make a decision overall. So that's the 4 buckets.
okay. Clarifying question?
Yes,
Does the subcommittee need to bring its decisions back to the full board for official reduction?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All buckets? Yeah.
I mean, overall, whatever the recommendation by the committee is to cut, it ultimately has to be approved by the full board in
Yeah.
December.
So that's the only thing.
Start again, keep, bucket 1, keep, bucket 2,
cut,
cut, bucket 3.
cut for a future
next
year. Mhm.
And bucket 4, we didn't make a decision.
Could make a decision, goes to the board.
Yeah, if we could back up for a second. So I think what the process just for our new
Yes.
folks. So CBO Moses or Ms. Kitchen, will present each contract. So they'll tell us like, first contract we're looking at is X. And everyone in the committee gets to ask questions, then we all make a recommendation. The way that we did it last time was up, down, or sideways. Up means stays, down is, I think we should cut it, side with it, I can live with it. Then at that point, if there is a distinction of the voting, we discuss it. And then that could also mean that it falls into one of the buckets Dr. Hurst was talking about. So that's kind of what it looks like. At the end, whatever recommendation we make as a committee, by the end of November, it all has to go to the full board in December.
Okay, so you would suggest, you're okay with keeping that kind of process?
Mhm.
It still makes sense?
I think
Okay,
so.
it's just we're not looking at a whole bunch. We're looking at this, for lack of a better word, and cuttable thing, right?
We're looking at, expenditures charged to the general fund.
So this is where you can,
This
if
is,
you
this will
have,
help our
this
structural
is,
debt.
if you had to pick out something, this is where it's got the pick and has to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, because it cannot happen on the restricted side.
Right.
So what we did last time that took us a little bit up and down on the roller coaster, we were looking at restricted stuff too, and we would have a full discussion with it, and then at the end of it was like, y'all can't cut that anyway.
Right.
So it's like, what? So now this is, all of that you guys are bringing us is things that are able to be plucked,
Yes.
because it comes from a budget side that's pluckable, which is the general unrestricted pocket.
Yep.
Okay, all right, good. All right, everyone know what we're doing? Yes?
Any questions on the process?
Any questions from anyone? No? Okay, here we go. CBO Moses, am I looking at the blue or am I looking at the green?
Let's go with the blue.
Okay, so
Unrestricted.
everybody online, Dr. Hurst is gonna pull up. You say go with the blue?
Mhm.
Okay, he's gonna pull up the blue contracts. And I only say they're blue because there's a blue line in front of me. Okay,
Okay, apologies,
go.
this is gonna be small for everybody to read. But we'll start with the, oh, they're not in order. Can you go all the way to the, is that the top?
That's the top.
So we have 2. So go to the
Oh,
tabs down across the bottom and find
Okay.
technology. Which blue are we starting with the?
Okay.
Can you see the tabs at the bottom?
So if you're in the room, your blues at the very top have titles. We're gonna wait and figure out which one we're gonna start with first.
If you're holding a paper in your hand, it says the title across the top.
Okay, let's start with technology department. So if you click the tab for technology, Dr. Hurst.
Okay.
And everyone in the room, will give you a second to find technology in your sheet.
All right, so we're looking at you can set aside the sheet with the green border for now. All right. We okay to move ahead?
Yes.
Okay, so we are now on technology department. And everyone in the room ready?
I'm
And-
sorry, can we drop that in the chat? Oh, to the people
Oh,
on Zoom, possible? Thank you.
Ms. Wong, they're doing it right now.
let me ensure that this sharing is appropriate. Okay, we're good.
And just for the people in the room, we hear comments from everyone. Voting is for the committee members. So the committee members include everyone that's represented by a union. And then President Gonzalez-Hoy and I. Dr. Hurst typically doesn't vote. Is that true?
That's true.
Oh, and we do not take public comment on that, but, oh, you're right. Okay, let me back up. We take questions from the committee members and comments from the committee member, and the committee members vote. Everyone in the room, just follow along with us. We appreciate you. We can read your face.
All right, and I'm gonna join.
All right.
Zoom. We have our Chief Technology Officer with us tonight, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Good
so-
evening, I'm here.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, so we'll start with the initial contract, and Tracy's on the line to answer any specific questions. Many of these,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Rafi, it's, the screen is frozen, is it just me?
No, it's frozen on me too. This is what it looks like for us.
oh,
I can still see the committee members moving, but not,
So the screen is froze.
yeah, you might just have to
Stop share
stop sharing and.
and reshare.
There you go, thank you,
Okay.
sorry.
okay. So this initial contract, and the first line is for NWN Corporation. It's a $297,000 contract. Ms. Logan, can you tell us about that, the purpose of that contract?
Yes, absolutely. And on the screen, thank you. So NWN is our VoIP phone provider. This provides phone services to all of our school sites. It's a base service. We are in year 4 of 5 of a contract that we have with NWN. So at this time, we're not able to reduce, but after next year, we will be able to go out and could potentially reduce that cost.
So what recommendation do you have for the committee?
My
I think-
recommendation,
Well, we have to have phones, right? So.
Yeah, we have to have phones. Okay.
yeah, my recommendation is that we keep it as is for the next years, meaning this year and the following year, and that we go back out and negotiate a cheaper cost for another 5-year contract. But at this time, we keep it.
I'm sorry, my apologies, this is Shanae. Which contract are we speaking to? Is it the very first one on the line? I got a little,
Yes.
okay.
Under the technology tab in the spreadsheet.
And let me just do one clarification. President Gonzalez-Hoy leads this part. So he's the voice, he'll be the voice in the room as the facilitator. You'll be able to hear him lead this part. So he'll lead the questions, the vote, and all of that part.
Cause I didn't get the link in the chat, that's why. I'm not able to follow.
Okay, hold on one second. Miss, can we get Ms. Vaughn the link?
If I do, then I'm taking it down. So you want me to just share it in the chat?
Yeah, can you share it in the chat so then they can click on it individually, right?
Yeah, I think we can just share it directly with Ms. Vaughn.
Okay. Or you can share it with Ms. Vaughn.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, but Ms. Vaughn, just for this first contract, we obviously cannot take it away. It's our phones, for classrooms and schools, so, we can move to the next one.
Okay, the next contract is for our Munis program. It's for Tyler Technologies, $297,000. This is the accounting system that we use. It is what our county Office of Education uses, and it enables us to do our financial and budgeting reporting. I believe at this time, this contract cannot be cut either. Tracy, do you have anything to add?
No, CBO Moses, that sums it up.
We can go back to paper and calculator. Please no. Please
Anyone
don't.
have any questions about the units? We don't know units pretty well. Okay, we obviously cannot cut it, so we can move forward to the next one.
Okay, we have a continuing contract with Conterra Ultra Broadband. You want to speak to that, Ms. Logan?
Yes, so Conterra is our wide area network provider. They are the ones who've laid fiber between all of our buildings and basically provide internet services to all of our schools. So you'll notice as we go down this list, there are various parts and pieces that we pay for that make it so that we can have internet in our schools. And this is the base infrastructure of this, of internet in all of our sites and schools. So we cannot cut it.
Okay, we can move forward to the next one.
Follett Destiny. So this is our library and instructional materials database. So this is where we store all of our textbooks, our library books, our musical instruments, our Chromebooks, our hotspots, any student instructional material. This is the database that's used to track those for all of our school sites.
Does anyone have any questions? I guess, what do you mean by tracking? Like, is it like a spreadsheet that like just shows everything, or is it like a?
No, it's an actual inventory management system. So, and it integrates with PowerSchool. So if I'm a student at Dover and I have a Chromebook and a library book and a science book and I transfer to Downer, those materials are going to follow me. If I lose them, or damage them, that's how fines are issued. It's all part of kind of a robust database tracking system for students throughout the system through all of their years with us in the district.
Got it, thank you. Ms. Vaughn, you have a question?
Oh, I was gonna ask with this particular, is this something that the library techs use?
Yes. So this is something that, the instructional media technicians use to manage inventory, also our librarians at our various sites. Yes, and the secretaries and office managers also have access and help with inventory management as well.
Now, is this the annual contract or is it 5-year? How long is the duration of the contract? Is it for the year or?
This is annual.
Annual contract. Okay. And is it effective? Is there something that you guys can get a little bit cheaper? Or is it better to hire more techs to do the work, or is this just a system that just houses everything for the techs?
We need both. We need a robust tool that houses the information and that is a database that does follow students from school to school so that we can take good care of our assets and inventory. And we need people to manage the information as well. So I would say the two go hand in hand. It doesn't make sense to have a lot of people if you don't also have a robust system that they're using as a tool to manage. And the tool can't just manage itself, right? Because folks have to check inventory out to the students every year.
And has it been helpful in the years? Have you seen the district keep track of the devices and things of that nature, the hotspots and stuff like that? Is this something that really works hand in hand with the staff?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a tool that we need.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Anyone else have questions?
I think I have a question.
Go ahead.
On this page, Ms. Logan,
Yes, ma'am.
what is there that we don't need? Because we're in number, well, we're on 4 or 5, and if we cut any of that, we lose the phone, we lose we lose the internet, so is there anything on here?
Yes, let me tell you a couple of things that I would put on the table for consideration.
Absolutely wonderful. I appreciate you. That would lift my spirits.
Yes. Okay, the first would be line 11. So Securely has two parts that we purchase. One is Securely Classroom. I do not recommend we get rid of Securely Classroom. This is a tool that teachers use for engagement in the classroom. However, the second tool, which is the 18,000, which you've highlighted, this is Securely Reveal. This gives us really good analytics around what students are using, which apps, what teachers are using, which apps, and does some cost and sort of total cost of ownership analysis for us. It is very, very helpful to help us understand how things are being used or not, adoption rates, if it's worth it to spend money on various tools. However, I would put it in potentially a nice to have, not a must have category. We can do that work manually in other ways. So that is one I would put on the table. I don't want us to cut it, but we're in the situation we're in. So that is one I would offer up. The other is line 24. Now this would take some change management. This is for Zoom. So let me point out that there are 2 line items for Zoom. The first is 27,000. Those are our Zoom licenses for staff for regular Zoom meetings. Then the line 25, the 7,000 are Zoom licenses for webinars, like what we're on right now. There is no replacement for a webinar. We need to have webinars for these kind of community meetings. So I'm not recommending that 25 be on the table, but row 24, we could potentially use Google Meet. We'd have to pay more for our version of Google, but we could use Google Meet in lieu of Zoom. And by doing that, we would not have to then also pay for Zoom.
So you're saying 27, yes, 7, no.
Correct.
Okay. You're doing great. Anything else?
Could you scroll down a little bit, please? Oh, yep. That's it. Unfortunately, everything else is basic operating for the district.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ms. Logan, for the transparency. Okay, committee, so the 2 items that Ms. Logan's looking at for potential that we could cut is the Securely for the 18,000 and then the Zoom for the 27. So yes, Ken.
2 questions. So if we did cut these, who's gonna do the work in the first for the Securely Classroom, where you're having to drill down on who's doing that? Is that a position, or do we have a tool already in place that can do that? Or is that adding more to a position load?
Yeah. Frankly, it's adding more. It would essentially be manual work. It would be pulling usage rates, usage data from individual apps and essentially building a database, pulling that in, and then doing the analysis based on cost per user.
So if I'm going, is that 18,000? I don't see a person that we could legitimately put that into and ask. I mean, if we start doing more and more cuts, you're asking more and more personnel at this point. I mean, I'm just being very clear on that one, because you're adding 18,000 to some, that could be overtime that we would end up having to pay somebody to develop this. And knowing technology, so I have a little background, very little, but a little background, that's going to mean that going to be a database administrator or a system admin having to build that. And that's a lot of work. I mean, I just understand that is a lot of work to build those tools to make it viable and to keep it active.
I agree, but I also, Tracy, one of the contracts I don't see on here, unless this is it, is the Clever contract, because Clever also provides software analytics. Did you speak to Clever and whether Clever does something similar, or is that completely separate?
Clever, yes. So you don't see Clever here, first of all, because Clever is free. Clever has a brilliant model where they charge the software companies to be part of Clever, therefore saving school districts money. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's what they all should do. So they do have analytics built in. We use their analytics. Now, not everything goes through Clever, right? Some software, they don't want to pay the Clever prices. They don't do it. So what we can get out of Clever is some, but it is partial. It provides a base, and then the rest we would need to add in.
Tracy, how often do you analyze the data now with this $18,000 contract?
So we certainly analyze it at least twice a year, as we enter into budgeting for the following year, recommendations for software applications that we keep versus those with low adoption rates. And then we do it kind of a couple months in advance of that to get baseline data in anticipation of those budget conversations. We can also, one of the nice things about it is that it's available all the time. So if we're considering a software application that is similar to something that we have, we can pull up that data on the ready, on demand at any moment to see what are the adoption rates, what is the total cost of ownership, is it worth considering something else for the price and the cost of change. So strictly, Denise, your question is, I would say absolutely twice a year, but then also on demand as we need.
Thank you. Ms. Bond, do you have a question? No, okay. Okay, everybody, well, let's vote on these two contracts. We'll separate them. Let's first vote on the securely, the 18,000. We heard comments, on all sides, so everyone could please put up your thumbs. Do you agree it should be kept? It should be cut. I can live with it, whatever way it goes. Okay, everybody show us. Mr. Mitchell? Ms. Bond?
The down means get rid of it?
Down is get rid of it. This is up, stays, left, I can live with whatever happens. Okay, I feel like I'm missing someone. The OCAA has to say, oh, we don't have a whole school, huh? Okay. Dr. Hurst?
They're cheating. Yeah.
I would say.
Okay, well, everybody, I saw everybody voting down. So, Ms. Moses will put this as a recommendation for cutting.
Okay.
And then for the other one is the Zoom video conferencing for meetings, which is separately from the webinars. This one's for 27,000. Anyone have any questions or comments on this one?
I do have a comment that if we do cut that there should be some time with both UTR and admin to just revive a training about using Google Meets and appropriateness of using it, because we are very familiar with Zoom.
Yep. It's a good suggestion. Ms. Neely Johnson, yeah.
I also want, and I know, Mr. Fleischman is on, I know there are a lot of, IEP meetings that are still done virtually. And so just making sure that if we use the Google platform that parents can access, because I know we've had some difficulty with that. And so sometimes we had, for people coming in from the outside, not within, having difficulty accessing, and so we should just be aware of that as well.
Yep. That's a really good point. Mr. Mitchell, I see your hand up.
I just, as somebody who's forced to use a WebEx by my employer, I just foresee a pandemonium if we were to switch all of district educators that I work with from Zoom to something else. And I think that interacting with parents and families would also be very difficult, and that Zoom is the standard now, and doing anything else is confusing. It's an inconvenience. It might lead to need for training, missed meetings. I just think there's a big downside to switching.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Kitchen.
I have a question and a comment. So I noticed in the Zoom contract that our virtual schools use Zoom, and so that could create a problem. And also I know that Google Meet does not allow recordings. And so if you need to record your session, you have to use Zoom. So my 2 cents.
And so can I add to that, that oftentimes our, parents of students with special needs do require a recording. We can't record on Zoom, but they have to be able to record from the platform, and it has been successful in doing that. We have our own recorders. I'm not sure how effective it is on Google Meet. And definitely could probably speak to see, and I think we have some other directors to kind of get a sense of how many actually use Google Meets versus Zoom.
Well, I was gonna
Fleischman, sorry, Mr. Fleischman, 1 second. So does virtual use Zoom for their classrooms?
That's what it says in the Zoom contract.
Yes, they do.
They do?
Yes, they do.
Well, then we can cut it. So it's not even an option because we have virtual school. So everything else, potentially we could learn how to use the other platforms, but obviously we're asking the whole school to completely switch the platform.
Yeah.
It will be a huge issue, so.
We're back to 18.
Yeah, well.
Yes.
We're at 18.
Yeah. Okay, well, we found 18. Very good, hero. Ms. Logan, thank you. Okay, Ms. Moses, how would you like to go from here? Could I ask one clarifying question before we move forward? So the total of what we're seeing in front of us is about $22 million in all the unrestricted contracts you brought forward. Is this all of the unrestricted contracts and services in the 4 and the 5,000s, or not? I guess my question.
These are all of the contracts that are already board approved and underway. There are more contracts that will come up for board approval. So this is incomplete.
Got it. Okay, so because I know that UTR is gonna ask us this question. Try not to look at Mr. Mitchell. We have $75 million that we approved in the adopted budget in service and other expenditures in the 5,000s, and 46 in books and supplies, 44 in books and supplies. So why is there such a discrepancy between this and what we adopted in the budget as expenditure?
So I believe that the numbers that you're citing is our combined budget. If
With
we look,
restricted.
yes, So that's combined restricted and unrestricted. When I look at, our adopted budget, and I'm trying to pull it up so I can give you the exact number, but, sorry.
Okay. You're pretty far away, I won't. Not for Dr. Johnson.
So I am going to pull up the exact amount in the unrestricted, and I'll give you that number. I thought it was in my slide presentation. It is not, but I do, oh, it's right here. Hold on. In the approved budget. Sorry, my slide function is not working. Okay, in the approved adopted budget, the amount for 5,000 to 599, which are the contracts that we're looking at, is 38.2 million. So for the 5,000, it's 38.2 million. When we look at the 4,000, I'll tell you now that that amount is 9.8 million. So the amount that you give, actually what was approved is 84 million when you combine both restricted and unrestricted. That's what's in our current budget. But what we're looking at is about 22 million of the 32 million that we wrote into the budget.
Got it. So when we approved the budget, it was, again, heavily on the restricted side.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, that's. Gosh, I'm around a bunch of math people. So that's 40, 48, 49 million total. So why are we only seeing 22?
Because what we've presented for you tonight is what we've already processed.
Got it. So then at the next meeting or future meetings, we're gonna see possible other, okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we're all clear, because I don't want us to then fight over what we don't have or have. Okay, I just wanted this to be crystal clear. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, so this is already pre-approved, and then the other, someone has to help me with math. The other 20 million,
The remaining balance.
the remaining balance, I need to learn from you. The remaining balance will be seen at a future committee.
Yes, first you'll see them for board approval. And then they'll make it to this list.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So,
Okay.
well, I have a question now. So if it comes to board approval first,
Mhm.
should it come to board approval first, or should it come here first? And then are we working backwards? So should it come to, so these contracts, what did you just say? You said it so nicely. This other bucket, the remaining balance, right? This remaining balance, should the remaining balance of however much, should it come here first? And then go to board approval? Because this committee is saying, hey, here's the balance. But we are saying this, we don't have to include because we're gonna use it to spend down the deficit. So should that come here before it go? In essence, should we freeze everything until it comes here first? And then go to board approval? Because it has to go to board approval anyway. But once it goes to board approval, then we're working backwards and saying, so, but shouldn't we do it here first, let it go to board approval, and then come back?
Could we potentially sidebar on that question later? So obviously it has bigger implications politically. So could we, maybe the four of us, have that conversation, maybe we can bring back to the committee at the next meeting?
Okay.
What we decide on that, because that would change I'm just ready, it would change the process of what we currently do.
With our contracts.
Yeah, and it's two of us making that decision, right? So, we would just have to make sure that we can do that.
That makes
So if we come back and tell the rest of the committee what we decide on that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's great.
I have a couple of questions.
Mhm.
My first question is, I see that there's, almost, $500,000 for Lozano Smith and $2 million for, AARL, whatever. Those are retainers, right? How much of those retainers do we spend each year? And is there a way, where does the money go if we don't spend it all? And where does the money come from if we happen to exceed those retainer amounts?
Christine, you're getting a little ahead. We're-
I was gonna say, she's jumping right into it.
Look at the clock, it's like, how do you
I wanna get to this right here. That's a big amount.
Where are we?
What would you like to answer now? Would you like to move forward to that page?
It's good.
So I'll give a general answer, and then when we reach those contracts, you can ask a more specific question. So the way in which our legal contracts are set up, we anticipate, based upon prior year's usage, how much we may need to allocate to a specific legal contract. With that said, we are billed hourly, so we only pay for what we use. So the budget is based upon the trend, but we can certainly work to reduce the usage. Does that make sense? And then that money would go back to the general fund.
Okay.
And conversely, if we went over what we budgeted, the money would have to come out of fund balance.
Okay.
Okay?
Sorry.
Well, now that you asked it, now I don't see it. Could you just tell us
What page
Oh,
are you on?
color.
oh, you were in a different phone.
No, I was doing some adding because they're in a whole bunch of different.
Yeah.
They are,
buckets.
yeah.
Each one, and I happen to see the name over and over again of Lozano, so I was just.
So you added them all,
calculating,
okay.
Right, you know, where.
Well, there is a time check. It's 5:51. What do we wanna do?
We could probably get through 3 more of these sheets in 10 minutes.
Okay, so,
Sorry for going through a break.
okay, so we're gonna get through 3 more. Our stopping time, let's say, you said 10 minutes?
Probably 7. It's
Okay,
pretty
let's do
simple.
7 minutes. Okay, so stopping time 6 o'clock, so we can then do a new, try to calendar out, and then we can go. President Gonzalez, you're up.
Okay, well, I'm looking at, the superintendent department, is that what you're looking at? Okay, everybody move to the superintendent department, it's a very small sheet. I heard Dr. Hurst laugh. Okay, well, Dr. Hurst, are you presenting?
Yeah, I can share. So the first one, Harvest Consulting, that's the work that we, the board approved that contract. That's a 1-year contract. It's not gonna continue this year. I would say we have to do this work. This is the equity work, the anti-racist work. I'm sorry, I caught whatever you had, Denise.
You were too close to this.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Hurst.
And I'm
I think
gonna-
that people here have seen, I think, the work from Ms.
Yes.
Rochelle Roger Ard. Would anyone have questions that they would like to ask about this contract? Ms. Chamberlain, then I think Ms.
So what do you mean by it does not continue this year?
So her,
This to December, or it ended in June?
it will end in June and her
That's
whole, yes. So her whole thing is to build capacity. So she has a team that she's working with. She'll build capacity within that team, and then that team will carry on the work for 24-25.
And who is part of that team? I think that team is people within the district.
Yes,
Do these people, I'm gonna be specific here, it's
Yes.
150. Are these longevity team members or team members that are new to our district, consultants contracted?
yeah, most
I'm
of
gonna
them,
be real specific
No.
on this, because I've gone through these
Yeah.
before. And then the people take their education
Yeah.
and hit the road and go someplace else and deal with it, and do what they've learned in another district or another atmosphere. And I want some buy-in that they're gonna stay. And
mhm,
that's a lot of money. I mean, 150 is one thing, but there's the people with the work that need to stay and continue to push that forward. They can have that continue on, because we're investing in them also, and they're a lot more money than 150,000.
yeah. So I'll just say, certainly there's people that have longevity. So one, there's a couple of in here, so Neely Johnson, Clerk Smith Folds, Christine Hatcher. So a number of people who have longevity, who's invested,
So you guys have to sign a 5-year commitment tonight
yes.
for Ms. Chamberlain.
Mhm.
you're being true to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanna make sure that people have invested interest in making sure that that goes forward and not just take off to another school district or another avenue. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We wanna make sure that they bring it back to our kids and families.
And I didn't talk about this a lot during solutions, Kim. However, I think just the model and the strand, so we're focusing on the student summit
Okay.
as well. We're focusing on educating all of our leaders. And then also our board, we're doing retreats with our board. We have the task force as well. We're gonna go deeper with some principles. But I think the model is different and she is building capacity across the system.
Does this include student, so you said that the student summit?
Yes, it does include
At
students.
what age level is the student summit?
So I don't think she has determined the criteria. I know for the strategic plan, we're looking at 6th grade through 12th grade.
That satisfies my.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, I missed your 7 minutes. I just looked it up, sorry.
No, you're totally fine. Ms. Steen, you had a question?
Are we moving on to the next?
I mean,
Studio five?
I think we can, because this money is going away, right? It's only
It is
one year.
going away.
Okay, so we can move to the next one unless someone has questions. Okay.
I'm gonna skip over the Studio 5. I think that's something that probably Martine, or if you know about whether that can go away. I'm not sure if the Studio 5 could go away. It says general fund.
So I think I can speak to that one. We certainly have categorical monies that are for social emotional learning and student well-being. I do think that the majority of the Studio 510 contracts are unrestricted. I'm not sure why this one is unrestricted. It is something that I think we could move.
We could move it.
Mhm.
So that means we save.
Yes, we can cut it and
So
we will shift
57.5
those
and
services to a
25,000.
categorical resource and
So
recapture the money.
$82,500.
Yes.
Yes.
But I calculated 180,500 because there's a line in here for Betty Reed. There's a line on the other one for Deanza, and then this is for community engagement. So there are 3 different pockets,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering how many students that serves?
Let me speak to that. So I can speak to that. If you look, the funding source is LCAP. It's the LCAP funding source. And this is where, what I was speaking to earlier about aligning our resources. Within our LCAP plan, we have services written in for social emotional well-being of our students, right? So this is a part of our LCAP plan. However, in discussions with Ms. Neely Johnson, we can decide that we move this out of LCAP and to a categorical resource because we do have categorical resources available that can absorb this expenditure.
In
And
all three of the
if
different
they're
budgets?
all LCAP, I'd have to look, but I'm assuming, what we write in our LCAP, we do have to fund. Or we change the LCAP. So that's where those expenditures are coming from.
And I'll just say that Martine just sent me a text and she said that this is for Hercules High School and Hercules Middle School. They don't have any other funding or SEL supports for their UPP kids. So she recommended to keep
But what
them,
I'm
but
hearing is that we could potentially put it in categoricals.
there we go.
We have a fund liberal enough to absorb it.
So
Or-
we can keep
or we-
it,
Or community school.
right, so we can keep it, but pay for it from a different
different
funding source.
Absolutely.
So what we're agreeing to is to keep Studio 510 for Hercules High, Hercules Middle, because this is what this particularly says,
Mhm.
but pay for it out of a different funding source. Is there is somebody taking notes?
I am.
Oh, thank you, Fran. So that's what we're agreeing. Do we have to come to a vote for that? Or we do have to vote?
Well, I think that everybody's in agreement, right?
Yeah.
But to Ms. Steen's point, I mean, it's more than just what we're looking in front of us. Because under business services, there's another 65,000. And then where's the other one? Ms. Steen? Oh, no.
It's on, the business services page and it's LCFF funding. Is that the same as LCAT?
On which one?
It's line, I don't have the line.
Which tab?
Business services,
Business
500.
services.
Thank you.
Not, if you look at the site,
Correct.
it's Deandra, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's the same thing. It's written into the LCAP, but that, for some reason, that contract originated in business services, but it serves Deandra, and it's the same thing.
It's because
what
it
is
was created
the
by
one
contract
that-
services.
Got it. Okay, so the total would be,
What's the total?
180,500.
180,500. Okay. So can I just make sure that I understand what we said? Studio 510, where we see it in our blues. We're saying yes to Studio 510. But the funding source becomes something different.
Mhm.
So then this committee just saved $180,000, $180,500. That's what I heard. Ms. Veronica, is that? That's not Veronica. Yeah.
So I just say the superintendent has
Is
to
that-
get something because this is all superintendents. Can I get a gold star?
No, absolutely. Okay, so that's,
you can take a piece.
so that's good. So that's what we agreed upon. Anybody on Zoom have a question, comment, or concern? Are you following up, Mr. Fleischman? I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was one thing that Denise asked that didn't get addressed, and that's how many students are being served. I want to be clear. So I was the principal at Betty Reed when we first brought Studio 510 on. And I can honestly say that the service reached certainly hundreds of children on that campus. From individual calling students down, from being involved with the health wellness center, from being a source of mediation when there were student conflicts. It was an invaluable resource that we could not have functioned without. And I think it's a really good fiscal investment because of the number of incidents that are avoided with the presence of Studio 510 on a campus, that all have, fiscal implications potentially, in addition to just moral and human implications for, the well-being of children. So I appreciate that we're looking to keep it on sites just from a different funding source. I hope that helps, Denise, to what you were asking.
Well, Guthrie, I want to say it helped me because I, I'm on the outside looking in and I hear you guys, but I don't know what these programs are and what they consist of. So that just that was going to be my question. What is this program and how is it serving the students? But Guthrie kind of explained what that was. So, there are people like me that don't understand all the lingo. So it'd be helpful to get a little bit of background of what it is that,
Studio 510 hires
Second.
young adults from the community and trains them in restorative practices, mental health supports, etc. They're not often clinicians and things like that, although I do believe they've done some expansion in their hiring. When I first partnered with Studio 510, it was just the founder. It was one person. And he had come to us through the Cal Trio program. He was an employer at UC Berkeley before he branched off on his own. The best way I can say it is when we were in school, there was always that one staff member that it could have been a custodian, it could have been your math teacher, it could have been your basketball coach that you knew was always there, was going to take care of you and things like that, and just seem to know a lot of things about a lot of things. Studio 510 does, those folks come in and they build those relationships, and they are trusted adults that, make the day feasible for kids and, for the adults on the campus as well.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I'm gonna ask them, how do you really feel, Guthrie?
Listen, coming out of COVID, that was one of the most crucial memories.
Yes.
Okay. President Gonzalez.
Okay, let's move forward. Thank you, Mr. Fleischman, for that information. So the next one, Dr. Hurst, Illuminated.
Illuminate Ed Collective, they're working with two people from HR for coaching So I have a small budget for executive team members and directors. This came to board and again, it's for 2 people in HR that's being coached, and it's only for this year. So it'll go away after this year.
Okay. Can you move forward to the next one?
Yes. Lozano Smith, this is actually a placeholder. We have not spent $50,000 at all. I think this is just something that's been set aside for the superintendent. But I will share, based on what you said, Denise, I mean, it is a larger conversation that we're having as a district on just our spending across the board for legal counsel and investigations. So we are going to sit down and come up with a plan on whether that's a 10% cut or whatever that's going to be. I think we have to make that commitment and share with the board. So I would say you should expect us to come back to you with a plan on how to reduce costs overall for legal fees.
Okay.
I won't spend $50,000 as a superintendent. I can share that with you.
It's $200,000 if you cut by 10%.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a figure that we talked about, 10%, so we can actually talk about that as an executive team.
Does this 50,000 include your Kevin, or is it just you?
This is just me.
Got it, okay.
Yeah. No, it's not, no. Yeah, you'll see when we go to the other departments, that some departments have,
Their own.
yeah, $2 million.
So it is just you,
This one is just me.
okay, cause.
Yeah.
For the board.
Well, most of, so if I can, so most of the conversations really for legal counsel for the superintendent really comes from the board. Like when the board asks me, so really, we utilize a lot of these funds whenever you're saying, okay, can you find out about this?
How much did we use last year?
Oh, wow. $1 million? Just,
$1 million? Like, I'm
I don't
gonna start
know.
calling
We
you.
would need to look at that.
For each department or?
For the board and superintendent.
We actually do have it broken down. I know you sent it to me, Veronica. I don't have,
That's there, it's up there.
And I just want to point out the last line item is the board member's contract for legal, so there's another 25,000.
Right.
That just for us?
yes.
But I guess I just wanna know how much we spent last year, because, I mean, I don't want us to commit to cutting it in half or taking away your 50,000.
Yeah.
And then we actually spent $1 million last year, right? So how much did we actually spend?
I mean, I could,
I have it.
Yeah.
Here.
mhm.
Last year, the superintendent's office, but that's gonna include superintendent and
And
board.
This is the
Yeah.
board
Was a total
mostly.
of 64,000.
Okay. 54,000.
You guys need to Google that. That's all there is to it.
But not 75.
But not 75.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, I
That's
think
10%
that,
right there. I mean, if you can
Yes.
get 10%,
Mhm.
because you also have AARLR. That's
AALR.
2 million,
Yeah.
right? 10%. Right. Oh, no, I understand that. I'm just saying, if you cut legal fees by 10%, then you take $200,000 from the district.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
we have to come back with you
Yeah.
with a plan.
I think
on
that
how
we have to
do
come
it.
back, but I do think that we as a board have to make a commitment also to decrease our need for legal services, right? Like we have also asked staff, so I wonder if we can just commit today to decreasing your 50,000. And we still have the 25,000. I wonder if we can just commit to keeping it at 50,000.
Yeah.
Which would be a reduction of 14,000, but I think as board president, I need to also ensure that other board members are
Mhm.
not overusing
Yes.
legal period.
Yes.
So I think that if you and I commit to that,
Okay.
I think that we can commit today to at least cutting it. Do you feel
Absolutely.
comfortable with that?
I do. Absolutely.
Okay,
So
Everybody
how
okay
much
with-
are we saving?
25,000.
25, so we're cutting 25.
We're cutting the 25, but keeping the 50, is that correct?
That's what I
Yes.
heard. Yeah. I mean, 25, 25, or, yeah, whichever way you wanna see it.
I'm sorry, I need 30. Are you saying, change Lozano to 25 and keep Lozano at 25 and change others, but they're both Lozano. So make them
Right.
both
Yes.
25.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's one more contract, which is the VIP Leadership Services. And that, again, that's 1 year, and that's for one of my executive cabinet members for coaching.
Okay, so if we start here, Clerk Singles added up, we found 224,130 to save. Obviously, majority of that is actually just moving into categorical, but, we at least made some movement, right, tonight. So far from 4.6, but I think it's more than I think we found in our first meeting last
It
night.
was, it is, yeah.
So we made good progress. I think that this is where we're gonna end, right? Yeah. So at the next meeting, we're gonna continue, we're gonna move forward to business services. And then we might actually also look at the other areas of unrestricted and the 4 and the 5,000s that we don't have here today. So I'll pass to you.
I see 2 hands in the room, so if we could get those questions, comments, concerns in very quickly, and then we will reclaim our time. And then last closing statements, and then we're out of here. Okay, Principal Steen.
I've brought this up a number of times and I don't know exactly how we can move forward, but in other districts, there are busing services, pick up general education students as well for a fee. So because we already have routes in particular neighborhoods, I'm wondering what the cost would be to investigate how we can transport. And I think this would also go to enrollment and attendance. If we've now opened our enrollment to choice schools with transfers, how we can raise some money with this transportation piece by utilizing our buses that have 2 or 3 students and fill them up with 8 or 10 students that want to collectively meet on a corner that's close to the baby's house, pick them up and bring them to a particular school. I think that, other districts do it. Not sure why we shouldn't at least pursue and see how it looks.
Make sure that we capture that, because that goes to the transportation conversation, Dr. Hurst, that we always want to come back to and have. Thank you for that.
Transportation and all.
I really, sorry, but I'm concerned about, I mean, I realize we cut the time and everything like that, but, I really wanted to go till 7 o'clock, and I wanted to get through this stuff. If we're gonna go, and we wanna meet with our team members going forward. But, my question was on transportation also, and a little bit of a breakdown on what all of this concerns. Just the issues that come from not having appropriate transportation at the beginning of the school year and continuing for students, and how it makes a difference with our attendance and our enrollment and making sure that we can go forward. So I'm concerned with per student and the cost of it. Not that it's so wide. I mean, I benefit from it, but I'm concerned over the challenges it brings us. Is what I'm concerned about. I mean, 83 students were not able to start the first couple of weeks of school unless the parents transported them. So,
Kim, what's the lottery? What is that $4 million? Sorry.
No, so I think I remember the answer to this, but I would love for you to answer that question, and then the next steps. We heard next steps as we need to have the transportation. Transportation needs to be kind of part of the conversation, so, but we also, next steps is to make sure that we honor the time, go all the way to the time, and make sure that we're getting through what we say that we're gonna get through. Those are next steps, and then before we leave out of here, we are gonna commit to meeting dates and times. So we can make sure that it's on everyone's calendar, and then we can pace the work, have a pacing guide to the work, so where we can make sure that we hit it at the right time. CBO Moses, can you answer the question about the lottery money?
Absolutely. So the lottery fund, is considered unrestricted general fund because there aren't any restrictions to how we use the money, with the exception of we cannot use it to build. Like, it can't be used for, construction, and I think that's something. We got an additional apportionment, I wanna say, this year. I can dig deeper into that. But this is where we chose to pay for the transportation fund, the transportation cost, because it is separate from the operating budget, but it is still considered general because it's a liberal fund that we could charge any people expense to.
And they've raised their prices $4 million over the past 4 years. It was $10 million in 2019.
Yeah, I can, if you'd like, I can bring more information about the transportation contract because I think there's more to it.
I'm sure.
I mean, I do know that our prices increased 30% this year because we got a 30% increase in our allocation as well. So basically, the transportation department said, hey, we haven't raised your rates and you now have this extra money, and so we want that. But I can speak further to that and talk about the full cost of transportation at the next meeting if you'd like. Sonia?
I just want to also add.
Oh, sorry. Not by.
I just want to also add to that, for transportation, there was an RFP, where they did put it out for bid and only 2 people bid. It was for student and Michael's Transportation, and Michael's Transportation said they can only do 6 routes a day. And for our district, our size, that would not work. And so maybe in the future, if we want to do some type of RFP, if we know of companies that can meet our demand, we should encourage them to bid.
We sent that out to, all transportation companies within the Bay Area, as far out as Stockton. And, the only replies we got were First Student and Michael's. And First Student, some of their price increases are because of the cost of gas and because of, new laws coming into it being enacted, that they have to convert some of their vehicles over to electric. And so some of those costs are being shared through the contract.
So I think that, I think transportation and what we're currently discussing is really important. I think that we would love to hear maybe topics that committee members really want to dig deeper in the future meeting. We only have 6 meetings total scheduled, right, where we have to finish the work. So we have to be really thoughtful of what we bring forward. So transportation can be part of one of those conversations. Ms. Millie Johnson and Mr. Fleischman, I would really like to have a conversation about SPED, a deeper conversation about SPED. And then anything else that anyone in the group wants to dig deeper on in this work, in this committee.
I want to dig deep into consultants and coaches. Consultants, coaches, anyone that we pull from the outside in.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Just that work with our adult staff, because there's direct services.
Yeah,
to
not,
students.
so I don't want to, for me personally, closest to the classroom is the last thing for me. So anything above that at the adult level, consultants, contracts, or consultant coaches at the top level, how I do that, the adult level.
Anything else?
Anyone on, any committee members on Zoom have anything particular you want to look at?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Moses, I would
Madam
like to.
Clerk.
Okay.
United Teachers of Richmond is very anxious to look at the 4,000s, the books and supplies, which is historically extremely inflated, and we'd like to really take a close look at that with everyone.
4,000s, okay. And then CBO Moses, you were gonna bring back something about, I'm gonna get the name wrong. Mr. Freeze happened to mention it. It's retirement, but not retirement.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, I will bring that back as well.
Okay, well, everybody, let's move forward to the calendars. Like I mentioned, it's gonna be 6 meetings, including today. The next meeting is taking place, everybody take out your calendars. The next meeting is happening the 17th of October. We are meeting at the Ansa High School, and it's going to be from 9 to 1. There's gonna be like a light breakfast, but don't come too hungry. Then the following meeting is happening on Halloween, the 31st of October. It's gonna be back here at Pinal Valley High School, and it's gonna be from 9 to 1.
I think that is a mistake.
Well,
I understand.
Yeah.
But being on a campus when it is not, when administrative services needs to be at school sites. I strongly feel that that is not appropriate.
okay. Well, let's put it for now, and then we'll have a discussion about it, okay? So for now, we'll leave it, but we will have a discussion. We'll definitely talk about that, Ms. Chamberlain. So I hear your point. Now that one was scheduled also for 9 to 1, am I correct? So we'll discuss it. And it's supposed to be at Pinal Valley, so anyways, we'll look at that.
What was the second date, Demetrio?
I'm sorry?
What was the second date?
The 7th. Did you get the 17th of October?
Not the 17th. Did you say another date after that?
The 31st.
Thank you.
Then the following one will be the 7th of November. That one will be at the Ansa High School. And that one's also from 9 to 1.
That's Ivy Beach and interest-based bargaining for me. And I believe Miss.
And principals
as well.
meeting.
And who else is on? And, okay.
Yeah, principals meeting. as
There's
well.
also principals meeting.
Okay. We'll
And
have-
it is 9 to 1 for both of those. It's also election day.
Let's make it afternoon then. Let's do 4 to 7 on the 7th.
I'm sorry, say that again, on the 7th of what?
Sorry, let me restart. The 7th of November, we're gonna do 4 to 7 PM at the Ansa High School.
Okay,
Yes, yeah, there'll be calendar invitations coming as well. Yeah. The following will be the 21st of November at Pinal Valley High School. And then that one, we have scheduled 4 to 7 PM, but we might switch to 9 to 1, but for now, let's just keep it at 4 to 7. So 4 to 7 PM, Pinal Valley on the 21st of November. And then our last one is the 28th of November. Yeah, that's after Thanksgiving. 28th of November at the Ansa High School from 9 to 1. Any questions? And that one we cannot move. So if there's anything wrong with it, whatever's happening, we gotta get through it.
I'm sorry.
I go for 9 to 1 on the 21st.
Oh, it's solutions? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, our labor partners, I think, will understand.
Well, our labor partners just decided on that today, since the principals, all the administrative staff that sits on that meeting asked it to be moved. And they couldn't do it any other day, so.
Got it. Okay, so it
That
wasn't
might
my
be a
screw
4
up.
to 7.
That's not what I heard. It was not my screw up, so. we're
No.
good. Okay, well, I will.
So the 21st of November, where you said it was at PV again?
Pinal Valley.
I know about it, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody is aware that is the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And many locations are closed.
That's Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
Is that the day that we're off? Is that the week that? What is,
Many people are off the entire.
There's no school the whole week, but we all work. I do.
okay,
That would be a good 9 to 1 and then switch the 28th to a 4 to 7.
so on 11/21, you wanna do that at 9 to 1 because, no?
So I don't want us to change the 28th. 28th is staying as is. Because
From
if we
9
have
to 1.
not finished the work, we need a full day of work that day. Because that is our deadline with the county and with the board. So
It's 11:20.
Why don't we switch another one that would be in conflict for the day?
Can we go 2 to 7? After solutions, which is over at 2?
On the
28.
on the 20.
Well,
Oh,
that's
2 to 7.
5 hours.
Why don't we, everybody take this, look at their calendar, mull it over, come back. We know that everybody's fine with the 17th.
I'm on vacation 3 of these days, so when I show up, we are gonna, if I have to move anything, we had better figure it out now. Be very clear.
Can you add the alternate,
Okay,
At
okay.
the beach zooming in.
Why don't we, thank you for that commitment. By the way, that's why you also have you can send someone.
Yeah, you have an alternate, if she has to step over the district.
Okay, let's, everybody restart. I'm gonna read you off the dates and the times, because we made some changes. Everybody's probably super confused now. Okay, so 17th at the Anza High School, 10 to 1, I mean 9 to 1. The 31st of October, we're gonna do 4 to 7 at Pinot Valley High School. The 7th of November, we're doing the Anza High School, 9 to 1. The 21st of November, we're doing 9 to 1 at Pinot Valley High School. And then the 28th of November, we are doing 2 to 7 at the Anza High School.
2 to 7.
2 to 7. So that our other partners can go to solutions as well.
11:7 was 9 to 1 at the end of.
Okay, do it one more time, just to
Okay.
make sure everybody's got it.
Okay, hopefully, like, do it, okay, the 17th of October, the Anza High School, 9 to 1. The
Yes.
31st of October, Pinot Valley High School, 4 to 7. The 7th of November, the Anza High School, 9 to 1. The 21st of November, Pinot Valley High School, 9 to 1. And then the 28th of November, the Anza High School, 2 to 7.
Sorry, November 7th is IBB, so 3 of us are not gonna be there, so can we do 2 to, or 4 to 7 or 2 to 5? On November 7th.
Yes.
2 to 5 on
Okay.
November 7th.
Let's do on the 7th. Let's do, let's do 3 to 7 on the 7th.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that?
Okay, at the
Is
end.
your schedule?
Thank you.
I know, I'm not checking. I'm gonna have to move some,
Okay.
move some stuff around.
I'm waiting to see what your daughter has to say about you missing her first Halloween, where she could go.
Mark has his hand up.
Mark?
No, Dr. Hurst, I was waving goodbye.
Oh.
Aren't we
there you go.
Okay, y'all, well, we have
Yes.
a commitment. I heard that, I heard Miss Chamberlain's gonna bring candy on Halloween dates, so. Okay, everybody.
Awesome.
Yes, good job.
So I think that.
That is Miss Dean.
Oh,
So thank you so much for this. I know that everybody's making sacrifices to make sure that this is able. Some of us have young children that are looking forward to doing events with them, especially around Halloween and other things. It's hard because I haven't looked at my calendar, right? So it's one of those things that I'm going to be here forever. I have to jump out. So I don't know what to do because, okay, so we'll talk about that, I guess, offline, try to figure out what happens if one of us has to step out because the work has to continue.
Well, it sounds to me, first suppose that Halloween is just an awful day for everyone,
Yeah.
so maybe the 4 of us can sit down and try to find an
Yes.
alternative day to propose.
Yeah.
Or extending something somewhere else to give us those hours. So we thank everyone for your flexibility. Thank you for your understanding. We are at 6:30 on the dot. Thank you, those of you who are on Zoom. Really, really appreciate it. If the 4 of us can stick around for 1/2 second, and then we can go, but the meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you everyone so much. We are looking forward to your feedback. If you have anything to say, please email us in.